Hey everybody, Chris Collard here, and with you again. We got I don't know if it's a tech tip, but it is replacing the solenoids on a Warn M8000 winch. So went to do a recovery a few weeks ago during some snowstorms, and I had just used the winch the day before, and when I hit the trigger, it just went click. So I had a vehicle down the side of the road. Unfortunately, we had couple other people there that had winches, and we were able to get them out, but it wasn't working. So it could be a number of different things. Usually when it clicks, it's probably a bad contact, but it's been on the vehicle for quite a while, like 15 years. So I pulled them out. I was going to clean them up and just clean the contacts and make sure all the solenoids are working. And when I did that, you can see here that I tore off one of the tabs. It was just rusted. I put a little WD-40 on it, and it just spun right out of the slotted groove that it's in. So I decided to replace them all. They were about, I think, $70 delivered. You can get them at Napa. It's just a standard starter type solenoid.
So once you get all of your solenoids mounted on the control plate, you want to put the bus bars on. Now, I suggest that you take a picture of how they were mounted before. These guys are going to go on like this. So you've got power running across outside between number 2 and number 1, and then closing that out, you've got number 2 and number 3. So now we're just going to go through the process of moving all these other wires onto the new solenoids on the old tray, but you also want to make sure that you're looking at this the right way, because you want to make sure that you got the W from the Warn. You got 2 bolts on one side, or little attachment bolts, and those go on this side of the mount. Yeah, so don't want to get it all backwards, so that's what we're doing now. So now we're going to move our leads over. Again, great wiring diagram online, but basically you've got a number of wires that are coming in here off the back of your controller. This white one, this one is going to end up going to power. I'll show you that in a minute. The greens are running crossways from number 1 to number 3. And then from number 2, this is the black wires, so number 2 to number 4. And then your brown ones, at least that's the color it looks like. They might call them red on the manual, but those are your commons, and those are running across from the inside here on number 1 to the inside terminal on number 2, to the inside terminal on number 4, and then across to the inside terminal on number 3. Okay, so while I had this 15-year-old winch solenoid apart, and it was super corroded, went with new solenoids and started cleaning that up, I thought, you know what? I might as well just take the winch out, because, it failed on me. I think that it was the connections, but it's been in the truck for 15 years, or in the rig for 15 years. And so I'm going to pull apart the drive mechanism, so the gearing, and clean that up, make sure everything looks good. I'll start by spooling off the synthetic winch line. This is a Viking winch line I've had on here for a long time. It still works, in pretty good shape. I'm not sure if I'm going to leave it on there or not. I'll have to check it out when I get it fully spooled out, but it's not in bad shape. It's actually been used quite a bit, but it's not frayed. Yeah, so that's what I'm going to do. Take the gearing apart, and then I got this great shop in Auburn, California called Boyle's Future Tech. They do alternators, starters. It's like I've been working with them for years, and they will also rebuild a winch motor. There's something I want to look at while I'm pulling this line out. I'm also, I'm looking at it for if it's frayed, damaged, like visually, but you can see it's really, really compressed. And this is one of the things about synthetic line is you look down here, and I'm not sure if that's mashed or if it's starting to get on the melting side. So when I tested recovery gear a number of years ago, I found that when you put a synthetic winch rope or a synthetic line or recovery rope across a drum, we were using about a 5-inch drum, and we put like full braking strength load on it, which was 20,000 pounds, depending on the strap or the rope. It would actually melt the material. So it generates so much heat with the pressure against the drum that it can melt the winch line. So that's something we're going to find out as I take the rest of this off. That concerns me a little bit. You can tell when it's melted because you can see this part of it. It's still, you know, all the fibers are there. It's pliable. When it melts, you'll have a section that's completely rigid. So that's it just feels like plastic that melted and then got cold. Yeah. So what I'm checking for here is if this material is just mashed. You know, so we still got all the fibers there. There's some scarring, a little bit of scarring on the outside. Might need a little further examination. These outer wraps usually don't end up being the problem. It would be right down here on the drum. So the synthetic line's usually, you know, held with a little set screw here, and you'll put a short tail across, and then the set screw, and then you'll start wrapping on it. But these things, this little Allen head screw, after years of getting just, you know, we abuse the heck out of our winches, and then we just want them to work all the time. Well, water gets in there, and you got to be real careful. I put a little penetrating oil on there, a little WD-40, and then I was able to move it just a little bit, and then I'm going to start running it back and forth, chasing, not necessarily chasing the threads out, but cleaning them up as I go and letting that penetrating oil get into the threads. So something to think about so you don't get excited and anxious and strip that sucker out. All right, so like I said, this thing's been on here a long time. Took my chances with this one, but I'm going to put a little WD-40 penetrating oil on all of these little hex, actually they're like shoulder bolts, Allen shoulder bolts that hold the gear assembly on and the motor on. So I'm going to take these off, but I'm going to hit them with a little WD-40 here and let it sit overnight. So we let the penetrating oil seep in there overnight, which is a good thing. Hopefully these things have been on here for, well, since it was new. So that's my neglect by not having this thing apart in 15 years. So 4mm, I'm going to see how these come off. You know, sometimes if it's well sealed, the threads in there will be nice and clean. Oh yeah, all right. So that's nice, that's one. So, looks like they're gonna be clean. Let's go around and get these done. Got them all out, and obviously these are buried in the case. What I'm looking at is, got clean threads. It had some thread sealer on there, it looks like. But also I'm looking at, you know, what kind of rust we have right here, which is where the seal rides. So there is a little bit of rust. You can see on all of them, but not bad. So we'll see what the guts look like when we take it apart. All right, so it looks pretty good. Looks really good. Well, I am impressed. So this is a whole set of your reduction gears, and I just kind of expected to see a lot of corrosion. I've got another one on one of my other rigs, and you know, I pulled it apart. It was just a mess, and that meant that there was bad seals right in this section right here. So that looks like is Warn did a pretty darn good job of sealing this unit. Look inside, it's all your original lubricant or grease, and there's like no dust, contaminations. You got a brass bearing at the end, inset there. Hopefully you can see that, and it's all clean. So, man, I'm excited about that. So I'm going to bring you guys in nice and close here. Hopefully we can see that. Yeah, that's nice. Very nice. Oh, dropping parts off. A little, find a little input gear there, but look at that. Super clean. So this makes my life easy.
All I'm going to do is put some additional bearing grease. I'm going to look up what grease Warn recommends in here, and just wrap it back up. All right, so I got a little bit of ahead of myself there. If you remember when we started, I mentioned that this free spooling lever has been really tight. It's moving just fine now, but I'm going to take it off, and it basically runs on a collar. So it's got like a cam inside this lever, and that cam pushes the collar inside the drum. You can see the splines there. Well, this inner one is actually moves. If I run this back and forth, you can see it slides in and out. So definitely want that functioning when you want to free spool your winch out. So I'm going to take that out real quick. It's also a 4 mil, I think. Yep. And you can tell when I heard that little thump, that's going to pull this out. This is your the cam that rides on. Well, it's not really a cam. It's got a groove in it. So when that groove turns, it pushes the gear in and out of the basically the outside of the housing to either lock or free spool. So when I pull that out, there are my guts. Don't want to damage this gasket because it's so nice and clean. I'm going to reuse it. We talked about how they've increased the thickness of the drum when everybody's using synthetic line. Now this is one of the older models, but I do want to take a look inside real quick. So what I'm looking at is, you know, how clean it is. There's some little, I don't know what that is, little debris in there on the bottom. Actually, it's all the way around, but I was just checking to see that it has not been like full of water. You can get water, it would take a long time to drain out, and then it would be rusty. So I called Andy at Warn, and he said, you know, they just recommend a low temp moly grease. So I'm gonna take a nice liberal amount, and I got these laid out the way they came in. It's always a good idea, and I like to take pictures of stuff. Fortunately, I got a little video, but you know, take pictures of things as lay them out or mark them. In this case, they all kind of come out in a series. You got your drum, you got the locking gear. There's a kind of a spacer washer that goes between that and the case, and then the large gear, and two of your, they're actually all reduction gears, but the other series of reduction gears, and then the shaft that connects all of it to the drum. So we're gonna give them a little grease. You notice this is the gear that connects this reduction gear set with the next reduction gear set. And if you turn it, you can see they're moving very slowly, like one rotation of the shaft at this I guess would be the tall end of the gearing, would just hardly move that at all. So that's how you get the reduction. It's compounded through 3 sets of gears. All right, now that I've got them lubed up, I'm just gonna stack them back up where they came out. Main gear reduction set. Get the secondary gear reduction set. One's in there just like that. And then this one is actually the little connection gear to the main drive shaft that goes in the top. And there we've got our, you know, greased up final assembly. That should be happy for quite a long time. So something I might add, if you try to drop this whole assembly, the gear assembly into the drum, it's got 2 sets of gears that have to mesh together. So they're straight cut gears, but they got to mesh together. And chance that this little end piece, last gear that runs on the shaft, will miss its the place that it wants to be. So I'm going to put these in stacks. Find the first one to line up. All the gears have to find their happy place. Okay, and you just heard that output gear slip down there. It actually landed in the hole it was supposed to be in, so that's a good thing. Second set, that's got to go in, and that's got splines on the
male splines on the lower, that final gear set. And so you just got to turn them around until they fit. And they will go in there and look something like that. Remember, you got to make sure you put this little spacer in there as well. It'll come out. You'll see it when it comes out with the gear assembly. And then finally, your big set. And you might have to spin these gears around a little bit. You got 3 of them in there. They all got to mesh, not only with the outside of the case, but also with the gear that comes off the center gear reduction set. So, okay, so we fast forwarded through a lot of that, but you're going to have to fiddle around with this a little bit to get them all to set in the bottom of this and be nice and happy. I'm putting the little brake cleaner on this rag. I'm not spraying it on the drum because I don't want it to drip down inside the drum and just dissolve the grease that we just put in there. And a little bit on that drum, so a good clean seal for the silicone. The way this thing is designed, it seems the best way to put it together is in layers, putting the gear drives on one at a time. All right, so let's see how this goes. We got them stacked like they came in, or like they came out. Keep all that in order. And I say we drop this first one on, but I don't want to drop it. I just want to make it happily set in. There we go. So there's the gear that rides on this shaft. The shaft runs through to the electric motor on the other side. And it's got a gear on it, and that's what this primary set runs off of. This one, that gear, the shaft goes through it, and it lines up with the primary. Might have to move those around a little bit. Final drive gears, they run in the same format. Main gear shaft goes through, and then this little guy is when we talked about falling out. That guy goes in the middle of it all. All right, so it took a little bit of fiddling there, but it finally dropped in. So that spline, the very kind of just, it's hardly a relief at all, but it sets on this end plate of the drum. And you got to make sure you got it set so that your bolts are lined up. Yeah, you might have to just raise it up just a little bit. Get an eyeball on the alignment. So that's where we are. That's one. I get the other one in on the back side. That's two, and that's good. The others will just like run right in. So drop those in. All right, with the whole unit back together, now with it down here, I'm going to torque the bolts, and you can see there's still just a little tiny little gap, but it's going to squeeze the rest of that silicone out. I did not look up the specs on these, but these are like 4mm screws or bolts, so you're not going to be putting gorilla force on them, all right? Maybe 18 pounds. And I like to torque stuff like this up like you would a wheel, so going around in a pattern. Okay, so with this guy snugged up, got a nice seal there. You want to put your free spooling lever back in. So in here, remember there's this collar. It's got gears on both sides of it, and it slides back and forth. So look through the hole, find the little slot, and just move it over with a screwdriver. It'll slide back and forth. And then also I want to show you this. This is where the keeper pin goes in. So the little Allen bolt that runs through, it runs through and rides in this groove right here. And so it's only going to go about 180 degrees. So if I have it set in here, it'll get it to set. Now, there we go. Sets in the hole. This would be in the forward position right there. And I'm going to put the set screw in to hold it in place so I know what the range of travel will be. So this will be in the front, on the bottom, which is fine. My access port is right there through the bumper. Forward position, when it's mounted, slide it 180 degrees until that's locked. If I can push it back to the forward position, that's free spooling. Now, there's a lot of resistance on it because it's turning a lot of gears and stuff in there that I got to spin. But so I'm pretty happy with that. So tomorrow, maybe this afternoon, I'm going to head down to Boyle's Future Tech and drop it off, and hopefully they can take it apart, the motor part, while I'm there. We can take a look at the guts, see what it looks like on the inside. All right, chapter 3. Okay, so now I'm down in Auburn, California. We're at Boyle's Future Tech with Greg, and like I've been trusting Warn winches for all these decades. Well, I've trusted these guys to repair my starters and alternators. So what did you find out? I mean,
well, run this like this. Got the case grounded to the vise. Basically what those solenoids do in your pack there is that it's going to connect this stud to one of these two. So this is how you test it. You bridge these two together, put power to here, and nothing. It should be running right now one way. To do it the other way, you go like this way, still nothing. So it works one way, it has to work the other. So anyway, so we're going to take this apart and see, and my guess is it's going to be all rusted up. And you see stuff falling out of it. That's usually a sign. Now this particular design by Warn, they've had troubles where they lose the ground. And they have this little tiny stud right here. You can see that. And that's what they use to ground. And what happens in between this brush holder plate and the case, that's why they do the ground, gets corrosion in between or rust or whatever, and it ruins the ground. So the brushes may be plenty long, but it's a real common deal. So what we normally do is take it apart, clean it, and then drill an additional ground stud in it to help ground it. And sometimes it's good to mark where you're taking it apart so you know where it goes back together. A lot of these are pinned, so that's not an issue, but okay, so there's the armature. There doesn't feel too bad. We normally take this out and we'll machine this on our lathe, make sure it's nice and smooth, and undercut it.
I got some rust on here, huh?
Yeah, that's not a big deal. And if you look inside, there's plenty of brushes.
What are we looking for there?
Well, if the brushes are stuck or short, you won't see this part of it here. You'll see they'll be way back here, or they'll obviously be stuck in. But that's those are all good. So it's definitely going to be this ground.
So when they're stuck in, they've got corrosion on the springs inside, and they get stuck back.
Exactly. And so what we're going to do is this we're going to lose the ground here. That's what the problem is. The trick is trying to get these little screws out that's providing the ground without breaking them off in the case.
How about it, Dave? You got it to us this afternoon. We'd have it for you tomorrow or
That is coming out. That's a good sign. Now we're going to disconnect the field coils away from the brush holder. The brushes are like brand new looking. They're not hardly any wear on them. Then that's what the coils look like. They are in good shape. There we go. Spline seal, and that's going to go into the splines inside the roller there. And then this bearing, you can replace it if you need to. This one doesn't feel too bad, actually. And neither does this one. So that's really what we normally do, is ask the customer if they want it changed or not. These aren't too bad, so I'll go ahead and get this machined. The commutator of this armature will normally machine a couple thousandths off at a time. You don't want to do too much because it'll end up going in and maybe ripping a bar off, and then you ruin the armature. So I took off 2 thousandths, and it was pretty good shape. So now you see the copper that got in between the slats there, that creates a short in the armature. And so what we'll have to do now is undercut it with our undercutter machine. Now, a lot of you, I know you don't have lace at home, so what you can do is just, if it's not a big flat spot on there, you can just sandpaper it with some emery cloth or something to get a nice smooth, to get all the corrosion and stuff off it. So. Use the emery cloth to get all the sharp edges off. Then I'll go over to the growler and make sure that it's not shorted. So now we're going to bring it over to the growler machine. This checks for if the armature is shorted or not. And so if there's any copper left over or any residue in between the slats of all these, then it will show short. And basically what it does is magnetize. So we use it, right now it's shorted for sure. It's magnetized, so we gotta go back through and undercut again. Try that again. So we had some copper stuck in between a couple of these slats and got them out right there, I believe. Let's test it again. Oh, that's better. Okay, we're good. We can proceed.
Definitely see some corrosion in there.
Yeah, that's on the inside. That's really not a big deal. The worst, where the corrosion we had to worry about is right here. And so right here, and what, like I said, I mentioned earlier that this was not Warn's best design in my opinion, because basically what they did is here's where the brush holder grounds, and they were just clamping it to that using the through bolts, which a lot of times that kind of works, but with the environment the winches are in, they get moisture and they build up the deal. So like I say, what we do is that we drill a hole in the case and then add a bolt down so it clamps it down better, gets a better ground. Now, when I did further inspection on this, when I finally got this all apart, I realized that this is one of Warn's, have already updated this one. They already provided the screw. So they knew they had a problem after a while, and that's what they fixed. The same thing we were doing to fix it. So that's all nice and clean now. And I showed you the brushes earlier, they're like brand new. And so what I did was, I've already got the other three back, and I'll just show you the fourth one. You just push it back with your fingers. Other side of this has holes where you can put pins in to hold the brushes back, and that's so you don't crush the brushes when you put them back together. So if you notice, this side has some corrosion too. That's not what they're using the ground, the brush holder with. So you can clean it up if you want to. It's not necessary in this particular way. So we're going to reassemble now. Armature is going to go back inside. There's a coupler inside here that's going to fit inside of. And basically what that does is going to turn the drum when you get it going there. There we go. Okay, so now we got all that tight in there. Put the top back on. The two through bolts. Again, these will all be done with hand tools. So we got it all back together, and now it's time to test it. When you're testing these, if it spins one way, or it's on the Jeep or whatever, it spins one way and not the other way, this motor can't work without it working both ways. So if you work one way and not the other, it's the solenoid setup, most likely, or a connection in between. So as I showed you before when we tested it, but I'm going to add this ground to make sure we have good ground here, because sometimes this paint doesn't always work very good. We're going to connect this lead to either one of the other two and power the other one. Turns one way. And we do the opposite, it should turn the other way.
Look at that.
Success.
All right. Like it. All right, so we got this all back together. You can see that, yeah, it looks all nice and new and shiny, and all the connectors are clean, and the bus bars are clear of contact with any of the lugs. So we're going to run with that. Oh, one last thing. When you take your winch off, you're going to have all of this spaghetti. Inspect it. You know, all of these actually look fine. There's no kinks or bends or tears or melts in the plastic. So I'm basically going to put them on on the wire wheel and clean them up, clean up the cables, and rerun them. Don't need the old solenoids. They served me well for 15 years. Got the electric motor back from Boyle's Feature Tech. That went great. He said everything was in fairly good shape. Little bit of surface rust, but was able to clean it up, put a new ground in it, make sure all the contacts are good. The brushes were good, which is important. So now, going to put it all back together. Decided, since my winch line was old and abused and ready to be replaced, I grabbed a plasma line from Bubba Rope. Good high quality product. So we're going to put the new rope on, put it all back together, and basically for about less than 120 bucks, not including the synthetic line. Pretty much, hopefully, this thing will run like new for another 15 years. So, all right, thanks for joining us, and this is like your super long Tech Tip Tuesday. See you next time.